New Capenna card gallery is officially released. We've had a couple of days to look through and postulate what's going to be good. And I'm here to talk about the top 5 best cards for the modern format from Streets of New Capenna, with a couple of honorable mentions in there to keep things spicy. But let's get right into the list and let's talk about what this new multicolor set can offer us. And now, talking about the set itself, it's a set that combines mobsters, mafia, family dynamics, the working class, everything coming together into a cool magic set where every single mafia family has their own personality and their own themes, and it's a take on the shards that we got in Alara. And with a lot of changes to the way the colors have worked since Alara to now, a lot of people are talking about how this set is either going to be a complete flop or it's going to be the second coming of a mini Eldraine, really. There's so much power in this set in terms of what the colors are doing, how they're coming together, and creating novel effects. So let's take a look at that. Let's see what Streets of New Capenna has to bring with Modern, with some honorable mentions. First and foremost, we're going to have 3. So I'm going to go through. There's going to be a little bit of variety, and then we're going to get into the list. We got Luxior, Giada's Gift, Giada's Gift, whatever it might be. This is a combo with Devoted Druid. So Devoted Druid, you need to put a -1/-1 counter on it to untap it, and then when you equip this onto it, equipped creature gets +1/+1 counter on it for each other counter on it. So it's going to be able to counteract the -1/-1 counter on it. You're going to be able to go infinite on mana, and it works on curve too. You play this on 1, Devoted on 2, and then you can equip it on 3, which is perfect. The problem is this really going to be the thing that brings Devoted combo back? I'm hesitant to say yes, just because there's so much removal in the format. Solitude, Prismatic Ending, Unholy Heat, Lightning Bolt, heck, even Fatal Push in some ways. There's so many ways to remove creatures that if the combo was going to be relevant beforehand, it would already be relevant. And it just feels like there's so much more powerful effects and so many more powerful strategies taking place in the modern format. But you know, the rule of 8 thing, where if you have enough copies of things that combo with each other, maybe. I'm more excited for this card in Commander and what fun, janky things it can do with certain planeswalkers. And that should be cool in itself. But again, Devoted combo, gotta bring it up. Secondly, I got Body Launderer. And now Body Launderer is a lot of interesting things at the same time. So 4 mana for a 3/3 with Death Touch, not great in terms of being a 3/3 for 4 mana, but it's great body that defends, and then when it enters the battlefield, you get immediate value in terms of conniving, so you get a draw, you get a loot. Then when it dies, you return another target non-rogue creature from your graveyard with equal or lesser power to the battlefield. So you get certain effects such as, you know, the recursion, you get the immediate value, and then it's worded in such a way where you can't return itself and you can't return other copies of it. The key thing is there's a lot of funky creatures that are actually power 3 or less. Ragavan, Dragon's Rage Shaller, Murktide Regent is a 3/3 at baseline. Now, I'm not saying that exactly is the best thing to return, but if your Murktide Regent is dead, you can return Murktide Regent with Body Launderer. And I don't know what you would do with that. It's just cool. It's just cool. You can bring back Tarmogoyfs. You can bring back so many other creatures with this card. And it's talking about equal or lesser power. So there are other creatures in the format that have higher toughness but have relatively low power. So again, there's a lot of things that you can do with this. Heck, you can even bring back Bloodbraid Elf, but you don't get the cast trigger. Whatever it might be, you can get aggressive. Body Launderer is going to be really cool, and any type of black-based mid-range strategy, I think. It has that cool recursion. It's good right when it comes down. It's a good blocker, and it's got that recursive value. So always nice that way. Third, in terms of the final card that we're going to be talking about in terms of honorable mentions, Cemetary Tampering. We're bringing back the hideaway mechanic from the hideaway lands themselves and putting them on enchantments as a cycle. I think this one is the best of the cycle in terms of how easy it is to meet the condition. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you mill 3 cards, and then if your graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you may play the exiled card that you put away with this. And that's what I love about it. It's not about different CMCs. You're going to see a lot of cards in Streets of New Capenna that require 5 different CMCs, 5 different mana values in the graveyard. This is just an amount. So a lot of times with the, graveyard-based strategies, a lot of times with the With the Delirium strategies, they're just putting cards into their graveyard by itself. And so it's not that hard to meet the 20 card condition. And obviously something like this interests me as a mill player. Being the 20 cards, it's not that hard to get there with things like Ashiok, Mesmeric, sometimes you even mill yourself and you have to meet that condition with Visions of Beyond. I'm really interested in it for that way. It might not be played in mill, but I like where the condition is going. And just being 3 mana, I don't think it's that bad. So in a mid-range strategy, it's not terrible. It's an enchantment, which is a hard permanent type to deal with. It's 3 CMC for prismatic ending, a little bit harder to deal with as well. And you just get this card that's tucked away for later use. So it's not bad. You get it on upkeep. The big downside to this, I would say, is really just the prevalence of Teferi Time Raveler stopping your ability to cast this. So, I mean, hey, at worst, you mill 3 cards over, feed your Delirium, open your graveyard up, whatever it might be. But then, you know, Teferi also stops this. Regardless, I think it's interesting. Finally, let's hop into the list with number 5. We're going to be talking about Workshop Warchief, the big return of a card like Thragtusk. Now, Thragtusk itself is going to be interesting in the sense that... Thragtusk is going to be interesting in the sense that it's comparable in terms of CMC, but there's a lot of things that you get in terms of plus or minus. So, first and foremost, it's the same mana value, not mana cost. So, Workshop Warchief costs green 3, whereas Thragtusk costs green 4. So, Workshop Warchief isn't as splashable. It's the same stat line at a 5/3. You get Trample off the Workshop Warchief, and then you get Blitz. So for 6 mana, you can cast it for its Blitz cost out of your hand, bring it in with haste, and then sacrifice it at the beginning of the end step, and then when it dies, you get to create a 4/4. The thing is with Thragtusk, it's a blink target. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 3/3. So you lose the Blink's energy there, but you get a dies trigger, which might be useful, especially in places like Commander, where you can create multiple death triggers. And then finally, when it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life, whereas Thragtusk gains you 5. Ultimately, I think in the places where Thragtusk is played, I don't think you can play Workshop Warchief. I'm thinking of primarily Greentron as an out to stop aggressive strategies, and then as well to gain 5 life. 5 life is relatively important. That's almost 2 burn spells. That's almost 1.5 burn spells. It gets over the top of the 4 damage burn spells such as Boros Charm, whereas Workshop Warchief just stops 1 burn spell. So 2 life is really important in an aggressive format against an aggressive deck, and then 1 green is really important in a deck that really creates colorless mana. So again, Thragtusk is really going to be the primary deck that plays a card. Tron is going to be the primary deck that plays a card like Thragtusk. I don't think they're playing Workshop Warchief. And you lose the ability to blink this with Restoration Angel and other cards that are usually played with Thragtusk. So where Workshop Warchief will take place, who knows? But Thragtusk has been kind of like a small pillar or a piece of Modern for a very long time, and a comparable stat line is very important. So something like this has value. It can do something, especially having the trample. So we'll see where it ends up. I don't know exactly where, but it'll be somewhere. Next up at number 4, we're going to have the charms themselves. And so I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to talk about 3 charms specifically. And again, it's just going to be charms in general. They're obviously going to be played in Modern. People are going to try them out. But I think individual ones have their own type of value. So I think it's worth going over. So again, this is number 4. We're going to be talking about 3 cards all tied together. Specifically, first we're going to talk about Obscura Charm, and I think this is going to be the big one that everyone is talking about, where you return target multicolored permanent with a mana value 3 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And so the big thing is people are talking about returning cards like Teferi Time Raveler from the graveyard to the battlefield. Being tapped doesn't actually matter. You can still activate Planeswalker abilities even when a Planeswalker is tapped, so that's great there. Then you're going to be able to counter an instant or sorcery spell, so you get a counter spell there. Perfect, especially in Esper strategies. And then you're going to be able to destroy creature or Planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. So you can only choose one, but you have the ability to destroy Teferis and return Teferis, as well as counter spell, counter force negation, whatever it might be, all in one. So this isn't exactly a staple. It's a cool 1 or 2 of. As a removal spell, I think there are some slightly better options out there. But the charms, the versatility is what's key. On rate, it might not be the best thing in the world at 3 mana, but the optionality is what makes these cards ultimately worth it, as we see with other charms across the Modern format. Next up, we have Maestro Charm. And the big thing that I like about this is the selection and the life gain against anti-aggro. So look at the top 5 cards of your library, put one of those cards in your hand and the rest in your graveyard. So you don't get the impulse draw. You do actually get filtering. You look at the top 5 cards, put in your hand. And now I should say, before we talk about this even further, Grixis is not exactly the most commonly played color pairing, section in Modern. It's mostly going to be Esper, blue-white, other blue-based strategies, and it's not really black, because black feels like the weakest color in Modern right now in a lot of ways. And I think this might be an option for those Grixis players, you know, the tier 2 to tier 3 decks, to give themselves more optionality to, in the late game, filter through the deck, look for the card that they need in that specific situation, as well as in the second mode, each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. That's fantastic, because in Grixis, having anti-aggro is actually huge. It's essentially a helix on a Maestro Charm. That's great. Outside of white, you have access to life gain in Grixis. And I think that's really important out of this charm. Options are key. And then finally, dealing 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. The majority of planeswalkers you're going to be able to ding in the face and kill. So that's really nice. What sucks is it's not 6, and I think that's the balancing factor of this. You're not able to kill something like Primeval Titan, and ultimately, I think if this dealt 6 damage, this would be a lot higher in the conversations in terms of what it can attack in Modern. But being 5 limits it slightly. I think people will always continue to bring up Primeval Titan in terms of what this card can answer. So there is that. But I think the optionality is key. Finally, the next charm is going to be Broker's Charm. And I really want to bring this up in terms of the fact that it just draws 2 cards. People have been trying to force Esper Charm for a very long time just because it's an Esper card. Now we have Obscura Charm. And then we also have cards like Archmage's Charm that draw 2 cards, but obviously has the counterspell aspect of it. This is a lot better. But I think just the ability to draw 2 cards immediately puts us into the conversation of playable. You can have the other modes of destroying an enchantment. Not a lot of relevant enchantments in the Modern format right now. There is Blood Moon, but I would hope that in a 3-color deck like this, it's usually going to be 4 colors. There aren't a lot of Bant decks. You're usually pairing this with a 4th color. In the 4-color decks, you're going to have answers to Blood Moon. This could be an answer to Blood Moon along with those, such as Prismatic Ending. And then other than that, you have target creature you control gets +1/+0. Until the end of turn, it deals damage equal to its power to a creature or planeswalker. And where I think a card like this gets played is going to be in the 4-color decks as a 1 or 2 of, as an extra ability to draw cards, deal with Blood Moon, and also kill opposing Teferis, kill opposing planeswalkers, whether that be 3 fairy, 4 fairy if it's getting played, 5 fairy, Jace, whatever it might be, and not waste an attack, essentially. So you get endurance, you get a Solitude out on the battlefield, you play this, you give it a big boost, you kill a creature, you kill an opposing blocker, you kill an opposing planeswalker, and then you swing through for a little bit of damage, a little bit of life gain off the Solitude, whatever it might be. So I think Broker's Charm has a place in the 4-color decks, but that deck is really tight in terms of slots anyway. So if it was going to be played anywhere, I think it's there. But again, options are key. I think just because this card draws 2 cards keeps it relevant in conversations. Not sure where it's going to be played, but again, keeping it in the conversation is key. And again, that was all number 4. We're going to pop into number 3 right now in Shadow of Mortality. Now, a lot of people are a little bit critical of this card, and I think they're rightfully so. They should be. Shadow of Mortality, at best, you're going to be at 7 life, and then you're going to be able to pay 2 black mana for a 7/7. And I think that's the biggest downside to this card. It doesn't have any evasion to it. Now, you could say Death Shadow doesn't have any evasion. The problem is you can get out Death Shadow much earlier. You can be at 12 life and get out Death Shadow, and then start growing from there. And then you create a threat where you can play Dress Down. You all of a sudden get a 13/13, and you attack through. The downside to this card is attached to its mana cost, and that's what's important. You can't Dress Down to reduce the mana cost, whatever. And now it's 15 mana. There are cards where you reveal the top card of your library. It's 15 mana. You ding someone for 15 mana. There's ways to use the CMC of this. People are talking about this in Death Shadow shells. I just think it's not really going to be that great. The problem is people are going to try it, and that's why I want to bring it up. You are going to be seeing this in the Modern leagues coming up when the set releases, and that's why it's important. Be ready for this, because it doesn't die to Unholy Heat, it doesn't die to Lightning Bolt, it doesn't die to Fatal Push, doesn't die to Prismatic Ending, and that's going to be the big upside for it. a lot of the traditional removal in the format doesn't kill this. Obviously, we have things like Solitude, which deal with this, Teferi Bounce, whatever it might be, and obviously Dex just being faster than this card, but not dying to a lot of the cheaper removal in the format is relevant, and that's why it matters. So take a look out for it. I don't think it's that playable, but people are going to bring it up. They are going to be playing in Death Shadow. They are going to be trying this, and ultimately, I think they'll realize it's not that playable. At number 2, I'm going to talk about Void Rend. Now, I might be a little biased here, but I really think this is great as a blue mage. I think this provides a lot of options. At 3 mana, this spell can't be countered, and you destroy a non-land permanent. Now, there's obviously other cards out there that don't have this type of mana restriction, that are easier to cast. They destroy lands as well. But I think the fact that this spell can't be countered gives it a spot as a 1-of in the main board, as a 1 to 2-of in sideboards, in Esper control shells, in 4-color control shells, in 3-color control shells, whatever it might be. It's not a staple. I think it's an option, and that's the key. I think that there's no way that control decks that can play this card won't play this card. Having the ability to destroy any non-land permanent is going to be so big, because that's where control decks are moving to, right? We have Counterspell, which is all-encompassing removal spell. We have Prismatic Ending, which can kill anything as long as you can put the mana into it. We have March of the Otherworldly Light, which is getting played in control decks to destroy other permanents as well. Why can't Void Rend be played, especially in the control mirror, where this spell can't be countered? And that's the key. You can play it at end step, you can play it on your main phase, around there to Teferi, whatever it might be, and they can't stop you. You kill their stuff, along with your suite of Otawaras, whatever it might be. You create this package of uncounterable interaction, and you just pay a little bit more mana for it, but that's the downside of it, right? Like, you get the optionality to have your spell resolve, but it's going to cost a little bit funkier in terms of the mana requirements. So I think Void Rend is interesting. I am going to be talking about this from a mill perspective in another video, but in terms of Modern itself, I think Void Rend is actually pretty cool. I'd be very surprised if Blue-Eye Control, Esper Control, or heck, even 4-color control, they could probably cast black in there, doesn't play a copy or 2 of this somewhere across the 75. It's a really cool option. Finally, I want to talk about Nixilis, the Adversary. This card is absolutely busted. This card, it's not Oko busted. I just think it's extremely powerful. For 3 mana, okay, in very aggressive colors, by the way, Rakdos is a commonly played color pairing in Modern right now. For a 3 loyalty Planeswalker, let's not even talk about the text here. Let's talk about the activated abilities. +1, each opponent loses 2 life unless they discard a card. And then if you control a demon or devil, you gain 2 life. That's big. In aggressive strategies like this, you have the ability to gain life. But you need a demon or devil. Well, guess what? On the -2, you get to create a devil, a 1/1 devil that says whenever this creature dies, you do 1 damage to any target. So really aggressive. Forces you to attack in, and your opponent can make, it forces your opponent to make weird blocks in the late game against an aggro strategy, which you're going to be in playing these colors. And then finally, the -7, it starts at 3. How do we get there, Shaft? Hold on now. Target player draws 7 cards, and you lose 7 life. You got the Gristle Daddy effect. Let's read its text. Casualty X. This copy isn't legendary and has starting loyal to X. As you cast this spell, you may sacrifice a creature with power X. When you do copy this spell, you create a second copy of Nixilis that isn't legendary, and it becomes a copy of this token. It essentially enters the battlefield with X loyalty. And that's the key. You come in, you can sacrifice a big permanent, create a massive second copy of Nixilis, immediately ultimate. Imagine that. On turn 2, you can even cast this as early as turn 2. You play a turn 1 mana dork with at least 1 power. I made the mistake on my short of forgetting the fact that you can't play this with 0 power dorks, such as Birds of Paradise or Gilded Goose, which is important because you might want to play this in the sack decks. You play this with at least a 1/1 dork on 1. On turn 2, you play this, and then you have 2 Planeswalkers. On turn 2, you have 2 Planeswalkers. Come on, the value of that is insane. And then each opponent lose 2 life unless they discard a card. Come on, they're probably going to be losing 2 life because they need answers to these Planeswalkers. They need to keep these cards to answer them. Or you can, +1 on 1. You can -2 on both. If you have a big enough creature that you sacrificed. 2 planeswalkers on turn 2 is insane, especially in the sacrifice decks, which are, ideally tier 2 or tier 3. This might push them up to that top of tier 2, tier 1.5 type thing with something like this, especially in Jund. If you sacrifice a Tarmogoyf, if you sacrifice a Death Shadow, you might be able to literally just immediately ultimate with one. You create a blocker with one, you ultimate with the other, you top deck this, you sacrifice one of your creatures, and then all of a sudden you're just drawing 7 cards. Even though you're losing 7 life, which is important, the other one can then, if you have a demon or a devil, be gaining you life. You have other options to bring you back into the game, but cards are ultimately important. And that's what I think is key about this card. It's so powerful. The play on turn 2 is what I think a lot of people are going to be trying out with Dorks. And I think we're going to be seeing this in a bunch of places. This card is so cool. And even if it only sticks to the sacrifice decks, it's going to be a very key part of Modern in terms of the planeswalkers that are played. It's going to be a staple in like one deck, and you're going to be seeing that deck, and you're going to be expecting Nixilis everywhere. This card is just busted. It's so cool in terms of sacrificing big creatures or playing it early, whatever it might be. I think Nixilis is definitely going to make waves in Modern. And now that's going to be it. That's going to be my list. Let me know what you think of the cards that I talked about. Let me know what cards you think I missed. I want to hear that down below, because we're all trying to work at this Modern format together. We're going to be entering a whole new world, new set, almost a new format. It's going to be cool. I want to hear about it in the comment section down below. Let me know there. But other than that, we're going to end off the video there. Check out the channel later this week for a mill, the best cards for mill type of video. We're going to be releasing an episode of the podcast with Jack and I talking about, the set in general for mill and Modern itself. This is kind of my version. We're going to get that down later this week as well. So stick around for that. And remember that even the impossible is possible. And as we ponder that thought, I hope you'll join me next time as we take a glimpse into the unthinkable.